Welcome and welcome back, everybody, to the OK Grognard Show. It is Thursday, May 6th, 2021, 10 a.m. Central, or just after, in beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Getting started a couple minutes late. Thank you, Sarah. Yes, I am. I got tied up with another thing. I wasn't even out of the house. I was just here, but I just got tied up with something. So I'm apologize for keeping you waiting, but I'm glad you stuck around because it's getting very exciting as we continue doing the spell explanations portion of the first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Dungeon Master's Guide. What do we got going? What do we got going? I think we left off with fourth level cleric spells, so we were getting into fifth, if I'm not mistaken. Where are we at? Yep, atonement. Right. Last thing we looked at was our old buddy. I'm gonna do this. That way we get me in there. We don't have to do it quite that far. There we go. I'll just sit back more. All right. What was it? What was above it? Yeah, detect lie, I think, was the last thing we read. We shouldn't waste any time. I'll tell you what. This section of the DMG is like 8 or 9 pages long. I mean, they felt it necessary to break it up with a full page illustration at one point. That tells you. Even they were feeling it when they realized how much material just this one subject was taking up in the book. So good morning to you. Hey, am I right, Sarah, that you guys are doing Thursday night at Lake Geneva Game or Wednesday night at Lake Geneva Games instead of Thursday to do your weekly board gaming over there? And if so, what did you play? I'm guessing since Jesse just bought Everdell that was potentially in the mix. But while he and I were texting about some other things yesterday, I forgot to ask him. Both nights now. Oh, and then Dennis just gets to go out on Wednesday with you guys while he finishes up bowling this season. Huh? And then Thursday it's still John and you, and I guess Jesse probably most nights, and Max at least on Thursday. Does that work out that way, or does he join you on Wednesday too? And you have five or more. Anyway, that's a lot of stuff probably that the usual Grognardians are potentially interested in, but not necessarily because they tuned in for more about spell explanations. So I'll jump right into that. Oh, Ruins of Arnak now. Okay. All right. Fifth level spells, Atonement. As the all in all of the campaign milieu, you must assume the role of the supernatural powers, judging the character making atonement. Yeah, this is a tricky one because this is one of those where the DM is not a neutral arbiter, right? A neutral facilitator, a person who checks what actions are being taken and then just gives the consequences, sometimes randomly, sometimes simply the most likely consequence, but most of the time, it's not player versus DM, and it's not supposed to be because if it were, the DM would just destroy everything because the DM has an unlimited number of monsters it can throw at the players, and sooner or later, player characters are going to buckle. So this, however, is one of those times when the DM, and it's almost always true too with NPCs, that when the DM takes on the persona of an NPC, and in this case NP deity, non-player deity, that they have to assume uh, certain personality traits, whether that's an adversarial position or it's a less than non-biased position anyway, um, and they have to take those things into consideration when adjudicating this spell. And so, if the actions appear to be very sincere, then the deity will be prone to allow atonement by means of this spell, with little or no sacrifice in addition, according to the deity's overall nature. So that could mean a few coins in the poor box or a major quest for a relic. The less sincere the character, the greater will be the actions required to complete the spell, i.e., a hollow voice rings forth and commands, "Go forth from here and return not until you bring captive the high priest of Osiris and all of the altar service of his temple as sacrifices to me in token of the sincerity of your true repentance." And that will be the final word from the deity until the deed is accomplished. So there's a suggestion on how to adjudicate atonement. A couple of cautions, I suppose. One is the sincerity has to come from the character, not from the player. So if a player is not, is not full-throated personally at the idea of doing all this, as long as the character is doing this, then don't be hard on the player. I mean, this is you're playing a character in this case, and they're playing a character in this case, and let's not confuse player with character because they're not the same thing. Then there may be any number of reasons why a player, especially one who might be in their regular life a religious person, might feel uncomfortable with this, might not feel so uncomfortable as an actor in a play or a gamer at the table um, saying that the character is doing something, but isn't going to want to maybe necessarily do it in first person or that sort of thing. So be sure to err on the side of the fact that this is a game. Keep that in mind and make sure that it isn't taken so far as to put someone off their Wheaties, their feed, right? Oh, gotcha. Max is in on Wednesday and not Thursday. Then Dennis is in on there. Okay, so 4 each night. That works out pretty well. Oh, you like the non-player deity joke? Good. Thank you very much. Ah, it's always good having people in the chat. Sarah, you're one of the most regular regulars for sure, and I appreciate it. Let's check the next one. Commune. The questions permitted must be asked consecutively in as brief a period as possible, as there is too much bother and disturbance for the supernatural powers otherwise. Gary just didn't like screwing around. He wants the game to keep moving. If the spellcaster lags or goes off to do anything else, the spell is broken, over and done with. Note that it is possible for a deity to answer, "I don't know," as most deities are not omniscient. That's pretty self-explanatory and well explained. It's a matter of keeping the game going for sure, and also a matter of keeping in mind that commune is not carte blanche to just know every behind-the-scenes thing that might be going on, because those deity may not be aware of everything either. So there it is. Plane shift. I didn't really use planes much. I've never used planes all that much except in very isolated cases. Plane shift. The material component of the spell is similar to a tuning fork, of course, and striking it at the proper time allows the energy vibrations of the person or persons or creature or creatures involved to match those of the desired plane. All you need to do is determine which notes, if you will, attune to which planes, and then when the caster has a metal rod, inform him or her of the note it sounds. An A sharp, for instance, might take one to the astral plane, while an A flat will move one to the elemental plane of air, and an A to the ethereal plane. Naturally, you can include the octave and even have chords to move a creature to some subplane, i.e., F sharp minor might move the caster or the subject to the ninth plane of hell. So there you go. You can imagine using this in a situation where you've got a plane jumping pipe organ, and whatever you happen to play on it, if it's even if it's accidental, might shift you off to another place. It's like the D&D version, planar version of Hot Tub Time Machine. So there you go. Quest is the next one on here. Quest and Geas is always were interesting things to adjudicate. It says here, if the person quested agrees to the task, even though this agreement might have been gained by force or trickery, then any chance of avoiding the quest, a saving throw, for instance, is negated. Those of the same religion as the cleric are not able to avoid a just and deserved quest either. So a cleric casting a quest on someone who is of the same alignment cannot save against that particular quest spell, according to this here. I would almost say, rather than alignment, of the same religion under the same deity. And provided the cleric is a devout cleric of a certain deity, and provided the player character it being cast upon is strong in their faith to that deity, I would say they couldn't avoid it, even if they weren't of the same alignment. You might make the caveat that they had to be maybe only a step removed alignment-wise, but of the same religion. That might work. And I don't mind the idea of using alignment in this case. I tend to avoid using it for much. I use it as a gauge of what has already happened rather than what someone can do, so that avoids the stickiness of feeling like you have to play your alignment rather than your character. But in this case, this is powerful magic, and if someone is of the same alignment, even if they're of a different deity, and those deities are therefore in the greater pantheon aligned to one another, not at odds with one another, then there is a case for saying that it should work from that cleric to that player character. And maybe by the same token, if even they are of the same alignment, if their deities are different and are for some reason opposed to one another in the great scheme of things, then maybe you want to allow the saving throw and also even allow some sort of a bonus. So it says here also, even if those are the same alignment, having to undertake just a proper quest must have a -4 if they wish to avoid it. So yeah, penalty or a bonus to a saving throw is certainly a way of adjudicating it that allows for some leeway. Uh, Nobody likes being railroaded, but a quest is a spell within the game. It's not being imposed necessarily, although it can be from outside the game by the DM. So be careful how you do that. People don't like to be forced into certain ways of playing or certain styles of game, and this can be something you want to avoid. It also says here, a quest can be negated by a cleric of a greater level than the one which placed the spell if the cleric is doing is of the same religion as the quested creature. Okay, that's good. I like that. I don't mind the idea that somebody of an opposed deity could remove a quest from someone if they're greater and then add some pluses or minuses based on the deity of whoever cast the spell, the deity of whoever was the recipient of the spell, so on and so forth. You got to work that out because there's a lot of situational things you have to decide as the DM of how it should work in your own campaign. But those are some factors to consider. Same religion as the casted creature. Some artifacts or relics can probably negate the spell, and any deity can do so, but only directly. Hmm. I don't. I tend to like to keep some mystery in my games, so deities don't tend to appear neither through their avatars. They are believed in, and there's the thinking that something is handing down the magic when people pray, so there must be a deity. But deities can be the same name or sometimes a slightly different name but appear the same. They can be the same name but appear differently from culture to culture in the game world. So I'd like to keep things a little separated between deities and those on the ground, boots on the ground. Something to think about if you're actually creating your own game world or have one and haven't already crossed the line of having deities involved in the world. Also, this idea of artifacts or relics. You can have locations that are so strong for a different deity that passing through them, like a circle of protection or something, can uh, either just negate whatever was cast or possibly gives an additional saving throw, depending on the level of the cleric who created the sanctified location, whatever is the case. So think about those possibilities. We have so much to go through. This is going to be a number of weeks of doing this if I keep them under a half hour. But that's okay. There's a lot to consider here, and it's all very interesting if you are DMing and you have to adjudicate these spells. So we'll keep going. 6 level spells. Aerial Servant. The spellcaster should be required to show you what form of protective inscription he or she has used when the spell is cast. The 3 forms mentioned here are a magic circle, a pentagram, a thaumaturgic triangle. Yeah, I get it. It sounds good that you want your players to be creative too, but don't hold them to that. Some people aren't, you know, artistic or aren't artistically inclined. On top of that, you want it to mesh with your own setting. So if you have certain expectations about how your setting works and what can be done in it, you may want to take the helm on this. Maybe give some options. Draw a few things up yourself. Show them to the player. Let them decide which they use and base it on, some variants for each one so that they can kind of fine tune what you're suggesting is possible. Well, they're invested in it. They feel like they're a part of it, even if they're not artistically inclined or creative in a way that allows them to come up with something. You may have some players that say, "Hey, I want to look just like this. I want it to be because it's this," and so on. Super. Definitely take that. Maybe make some suggestions of your own or adjustments based on how you feel this should manifest within your setting, your game setting. If it's no big deal, just fly with it. the more you can get players to dive in and invest themselves in the game, immerse themselves in your setting, the better off your game will be overall, 99% of the time. Continuing with Blade Barrier, this spell is absolutely stationary. It does not move in any way except with respect to the circling of the blades around the fixed point of the spell center. The plane of rotation of the blades can be horizontal, vertical, or anything in between. However, uh, however, it can be that. Note that creatures within the area of the blade of the barrier, when it is invoked, are entitled to a saving throw, and if the save is made, the blades are avoided and no damage is taken. So you can jump out of the way, potentially with a saving throw against spell. This is pretty straightforward. This is just a way of making sure that it's a little more clarified than it is in the player's handbook. Conjure Animals is next. For a list of these creatures, see Appendix L. Conjured Animals. We've gone over all the appendices before, so we won't go over that again here, but there's a whole list there. It's complete with percentage, so if you want it to be random, or if it is supposed to be random, that's fine. But anything on the list, if it is something that can be conjured and the player character, the spellcaster, is meant to be able to choose, then there's your list to suggest. Maybe they just suggest what they want, and you pick something that is either on the list and matches what they say, or is close to it. Somebody says, I want buffaloes, and there are no buffaloes on the list, but there are a bull. Maybe go with that. Something along those lines. Find the path. Whether the creature is held. Save. Well, no. If the creature is held, it can't move out of the way because with the blade barrier, it does say it can be avoided by inference by moving. So no, that would slice right into the held creature. I don't know if I'd want to do a little alignment check on somebody. Maybe they, like I said earlier, alignment is a gauge of what has happened, not what you can do. So anyone could do that, but if you've already got someone held and you're of a good alignment or even of a neutral alignment, is it okay dropping a blade barrier on them? Now maybe someone else is doing the blade barrier and isn't aware that thing is held, that person is held, that creature is held. So it's they become a victim of circumstance, but a lot of other things to consider in there, George. It's very circumstantial, right? But if they can't move out of the way, I'd say no save. That'd be me though. Always the call of the DM, right? Let's look at Find the Path. This spell is subject to the same sort of abuse. All right, Gary. I don't know if it's abuse. Let's throw this out. Maybe I said it last time. I don't think it's abuse for a player to want to work within the rules to have the best advantage they can for their character. I don't think that's abusing the rules so much as wanting to understand them and knowing where the limits are and trying to stay within the limits. Now, I think sometimes in the writing of the DMG, you'll see areas where Gary feels as if players are taking advantage of maybe a rule that was written a little too vaguely, and some of these spell explanations come off as pushback against that. Because let's not forget, they were still editing this when the player's handbook came out, and people were still playing. So there were a lot of times when players would suggest, well, it says I could do this. Does that mean I can do this? And it looks like Gary, in some cases, was saying, well, no, it's not meant to do that. You're going too far. And it's, you know, We don't know exactly what happened at any given table at any time, but the way he writes this suggests certain things. So he says, this spell is subject to the same sort of abuse as locate object spell is. A locale is not an object. The spell will enable the caster to find a way into or out of some area, but this area must be known or identified in itself, not for what it might house. Thus, one could use it to find a great forest of ash trees, but not to find a forest where a green dragon lived. In the latter case, the desire is to find an object, not an area or locale. Similarly, use of a find the path spell to locate a way to a hoard of platinum pieces is absolutely useless, as it must not be allowed, but the spell could be used to find a level known to have such a hoard of coins, or a cavern with a pool in it might be pointed to, etc. The spell finds a way to a locale or an area, and whatever objects are therein are not meaningful to the spell. Pretty clear on that, and it makes sense. I think a lot of these spells are pretty well written in the player's handbook, and so some of these explanations might feel like piling on. So I wouldn't always turn to them transparently. George adds in, I suspect a DM ruling on any spell or ability would impact the abuse level going forward for a particular gaming party. Absolutely. If you definitively say this works this way, don't be surprised if somewhere down the line, somebody who is using it that way, even if you find it to be uh, again, but differently abusive later on, if that's your term, then without a doubt, once you've made it known that it works a certain way, you got to stick with that. So be consistent. Um, if you're not going to be consistent, then at least be fair in how you adjudicate it. Don't uh, don't make the players pay a penalty for something you have outright said is how something works. Give in for a certain time and then say, hey, look, I'm going to let it go this time, but I shouldn't have been that specific last time. That has now opened up a door to something else that I don't feel I want happening in my game. Please understand that I'm gonna give you this time, and it's my fault. That's why I don't want to take it away from you. But going forward, that won't happen. So, just be clear because you've got to be able to run your game and you've got to be able to run it in a way that you feel is best. But at the same time, you don't want your players feeling as if you're being capricious or arbitrary in your rulings, which might make it untenable for them to make any sort of plans or strategies. If they don't know how things work, at least to some degree, and by all means, you don't want everybody constantly putting trial balloons out rather than taking actions because that will slow a game to a standstill. Well, what if I did this? Would it work like this? I don't know. You got to try. But you said it works like this, and the books say it works like that. You don't want to get into all that, so be careful not to handcuff your players so much with rulings that they don't feel like they can take an action without constantly be putting their characters in jeopardy. I think that's worth saying. And heal. What a great spell. The spell will not cure serious forms of mental disorders not related to spells or inflicted by injury to the brain. Okay, that's interesting enough. Um, I don't know with all we know about stuff like that now that I wouldn't invert that. Injury to the brain, if an injury to the brain is healed and that is what caused some sort of mental disorder, then maybe a heal spell should be able to deal with that, even if it wasn't magically hurting the brain like a feeble mind spell or something. Word of recall: for each plane that the cleric is removed from the plane of his or her designated sanctuary, there is a 10% cumulative chance that the cleric will be irrevocably lost in the intervening astral or ethereal spaces. Ouch. Lost but not forgotten. Well, I tell you what, that was pretty clear. We're gonna put the pause button on here till next week because we're just over 30 minutes, and we are gonna say thanks to those who popped into the chat today, and also say to everyone that if you do stop into the chat and join us, by all means follow the channel. And if you are catching up with us on YouTube, without a doubt, subscribe to the channel, hit that little bell that gives you notifications when new videos are uploaded. We upload them right after we stream them on Mondays and Thursdays at 10 a.m. Central on Twitch. And usually within the hour they're uploaded onto YouTube, archived over there, so you can watch them that way too. Give us a thumbs up on any videos you watch and enjoy. Feel free to make comments if there's some constructive criticism you want to add, or you just want to join the topic of conversation. It's all good. I want to thank everybody coming to us through YouTube or through Twitch and jumping in on the chat or making comments as they may. We appreciate it greatly. This has been the OK Grognard Show from beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Bye-bye.